All right, Graff League, summer 2023. Yippee. Hello. I sometimes go by Graff. This is my league. This is actually the second season I'm doing of this, but I mean, it's kind of low quality. I thought it'd be a little bit more interesting though to try to present things for a bit of a change, just kind of talk about stuff. I like Pokemon quite a lot, and ooh, that's a bit of a noisy mic, a little bit of creaking going on here. Some high quality audio experience just for all of you guys. But anyways, I thought this was kind of fun. I had some really interesting teams in here, and my friends have had some really cool stuff to show off. So I kind of want to talk on their behalf and see how that goes, and really just give a quick preview of their teams. I want to give feedback on their matches as these play out, and yeah, just kind of document, show things off. General idea. Let's talk about, I guess, a draft league. Um, I'm gonna kind of go with the general idea that you guys understand how a draft league works with Pokemon. Just go over the specifics of what this one is doing. This is the generally just following the standard rule set for post Pokemon Home of Scarlet and Violet. I'm just stealing their template for the most part. So we're getting 120 points, drafting teams between 10 and 12, and you must have between 2 and 3 Terra Captains. Combined, they can't be worth more than 15 points individually. They can only be worth up to 9. And they must have only 3 types they can choose between for their Terra types. One of them must be Stab. I'm trying to remember some of the other stuff. In battle, we're just using the usual Smogon singles clauses, so, Sleep Clause, evasion boosting, don't do that kind of stuff, Moody's banned, no OCOs. Realistically, I'm not trying to give a super comprehensive thing. If you guys are super curious, you can kind of just look up, like I said, the Smogon standard. Yeah, this is not supposed to be a formal presentation here, all right, in case anyone's watching. Speaking of which, before I continue, if anybody's watching and hasn't already immediately clicked off, why? All right, let me know. Let me know why. Because here's my bet is of the people that would ever watch this, it's going to probably be anybody who's in the league who doesn't serve to benefit from this at all. And at that case, they're probably already clicking off of this video anyways. Enough rambling. Let's move on. I want to talk about some teams. So our first team, good boy Reggie. He's got some other aliases here, so I thought I'd include them. Lovely lad. He is, I would probably say, the least experienced here when it comes to competitive Pokemon, especially with Pokemon Showdown and team building. With that said, he decided that instead of trying to figure out what all the Pokemon do and build a team around it, he thought it'd be a more interesting idea to roll the dice, per se. His entire team was randomly generated. So when I click this next button here, some of that makes sense as to why these are showing up in here. You definitely see some surprises with Delibird and Numel, but it is bafflingly impressive how good all of this is. His first pick was Low Kicks, which definitely caught me off guard. He hadn't yet revealed to me that he was going to be randomizing all his Pokemon, so I was a little baffled why that was his first pick, but also it's a good enough of a Pokemon where it seemed somewhat believable that this was actually a genuine, desire and pick. What I'm more impressed by is the fact that he actually has a double regenerator combo here with a Moongus and Galarian Slowking. I actually expect him to be able to make some good work with that. He's got some good defensive options with that. I mean, look at this. You got Moongus, Galarian Slowking, Colossal's nothing to shrug off for either defensively. Obviously, Rock is opening him up to a lot of weaknesses, but like Fire's pretty all right. He's doing pretty okay with that. Um, and then, we're just going to kind of ignore the fact that he has both Haxorus and Chen Pao. um, Chen Pao, the absolute monster, it's like, realistically, like, there's very few Pokemon that can check Chen Pao very well. I mean, there's a reason why he's banned for singles. I mean, absolutely a shredding monster. With that said as well, though, I mean, even some of these like cheaper picks in here are pretty interesting. Delibird and Numel, they're kind of jokes, but I mean, they're usable. But Rotom Heat and Hisuian Electrode are both really, really interesting. I'd love to see him try to put some work out with those. Anyways, let's talk about Terra Captains on this though. So his first pick was Nummel. He honestly didn't have too many options for Terra Captains. Again, they can only be worth up to 9 individually, so anything more than 9 he can't choose as a captain, and combined they can only add up to 15. So he picked Nummel first off, and he went with Fire, Ground, and Steel. So only one of these had to be Stab, but he went for 2 Stab options, Fire and Ground. Fire obviously is just, it's nice defensively, so I mean I feel like it was definitely one he would have wanted to bring. I'm assuming Ground partially just if you wanted to keep an electric immunity but remove some of your weaknesses. I think probably it's just either Stab or just comfort knowing, okay, look, I can hit hard. It's a type I've already got. Works all right. Steel, purely defensive. It's a good default. I think, that will be pretty interesting to use with that. You could probably just prioritize having a solid wall Nummel. You got some interesting stuff I kind of want to talk about specifically later. Colossal, he kind of did the same thing here with Fire Rock for double stab. Again, Fire's very nice defensively. I think Rock's can be really interesting. When I show some of the other teams later, you'll kind of see a common theme that there are quite a few teams here that have some serious Rock weakness. So being able to double dip on that stab bonus with Rock moves, Colossal could actually be a pretty serious threat. And as far as I'm aware, fighting only exists because Colossal has body press and a very high defense stat. Mimikyu's his last captain here. This is the most expensive option he could have had for a Terra captain. And for the most part, I think pretty much all of this is just trying to go for offensive. Just that little bit of extra damage. Ghost, Fairy, and Steel. Steel does let you get some kind of defensive play. For instance, you are now immune to poison, which would usually be a very easy way to damage Mimikyu. But that Ghost and Fairy in there, Mimikyu is a very offensive Pokemon already, and being able to squeeze out that little bit of extra damage, he's probably going to be pretty alright. We'll see how that plays out. Now, I have some slides here, alright? Yeah, you can laugh at the quality, but look, I did a good job, I think, maybe a presentable job, but we got Nummel here, and I just want to talk about, it's like, okay, general stats, some of their abilities and moves and things like that. Just give a little bit more inspection on Pokemon that, we may not necessarily know exactly how they're going to be useful just at a surface glance. Nummel has garbage stats. I'm not going to beat around the bush on that. I mean, the best stat it has is special attack of 65. That's pretty bad. At least the one saving grace it has is the fact that because it's not fully evolved, it can hold the Eviolite item. It's going to boost its defenses by 50%. And it has one of the funniest abilities to have in here, Simple. So Simple will take any stat changes you have in battle and double them. So, for instance, Curse, where Curse normally gives you +1 to attack and defense and -1 to speed. It's going to give you +2 to each of those and -2 to speed. That's pretty significant. So you can notice I've put in here Curse, Flame Charge, Trailblaze, Amnesia. Don't listen to the fact it says First Impression on there. That's because I was copy pasting some of the other bits. And we've had a few Pokemon have First Impression, and somehow that landed in there. Ignore that. But he has a very good access to some setup. Curse, Flame Charge, Trailblaze, and Amnesia. They're all fantastic. I think he even gets Stockpile, and that's pretty funny. And then offensively, he gets Body Press, Earthquake, Lava Plume. Like, these are fantastic attacking moves as well. I mean, realistically, the only thing holding him back here is his stats. Like, just the raw stat numbers. Otherwise, this would be a fantastic Pokemon and an absolute monstrous threat. I guess the other thing holding him back, obviously, is also recovery in this regard. Since he's stuck to holding the Eviolite item, he's probably not going to be wanting to use leftovers. Otherwise, again, he's really hurting his bulk, which means the only healing option he has is Rest. So, you do Rest, a setup move, and if you want a second one to get some, actual well-rounded stats increased, then you're left with only one attacking option, and that's, going to restrict it quite a bit. Next Pokemon I want to bring up is Lokix. This is the first Pokemon he brought in, which I find really interesting. It's a really cool Pokemon. Definitely one of the benefits here, his ability Tinted Lens means that he does double damage on resisted moves. I like to phrase it as you're ignoring one layer of resistance. And I find it kind of fitting that this is the first Pokemon he drafted, as he self-admitted that he does not know type matchups in Pokemon. So this is a Pokemon where he just gets to click the button and do the damage anyways, and he doesn't have to worry about type matchups near as much with this guy. You get some really good moves on him too. I mean, there's that first impression I mentioned. This is a move that always hits first. It's like bug fake out, but instead of getting a flinch, you just do a lot more damage. U-turns obviously in a singles format, top notch to have. Leech life is actually really good. But then, I mean, even get some extra stuff. You know, Sucker Punch is always good for priority. And then I've included Axe Kick, Throat Chop. They're nice utility and coverage. Sword Stance, though. Sword Stance is actually pretty interesting here because low kicks, 102 attack is good, but I mean, still not realistically the best. Again, low kicks has all right coverage, good moves and everything, but he could hit harder, right? He's not threatening one-hit knockouts, and with his bulk being as low as it is, it means he's often in a situation where he really does need a lot of chip. Or Sword Stance can just, do do a ton. I mean, Sword Stance and just start throwing off sucker punches everywhere, and things will just start dropping. 92 speed it's all right, especially since we're in a draft format. You're gonna be finding a lot of things are relatively slow. And there's a lot of Pokemon who have 90 speed, so 92 means you can just squeak out right past them. So I think low kicks will be something really interesting. I don't expect it to be like one of the big killers, but it can definitely be real annoying. And this last Pokemon I want to talk about here is Haxorus for his team. I mean, 147 attack. Mold Breaker means that he can ignore abilities, so Levitate Pokemon are going to be, getting hit by his Earthquakes. He can use status moves on Goldango. that's that's something. I mean, I don't think you would with Haxorus. He's very much an offensive Pokemon, but you know, he is capable apparently. 97 speed. Hey, look at that, slightly faster, right? But no, definitely the big thing here is the attack of 147. He has Dragon Dance and Sword Dance because Game Freak decided that one of those is not enough for him, and basically enough coverage to KO all of his threats. I mean, look, he can literally just slot Iron Head to deal with both fairies and ice types. It's he's an absolute monster. I mean, I think anybody who's played random battles enough knows how much this absolute threat is. And yeah, another Pokemon. Okay, he actually does get first impression. I'm not lying. It is not a typo. He does get first impression. Okay, I'm gonna move on to another team here. This is Logan. This is our second member on the draft league. Um, we have on his team just huge offensive pressure for starting things out. Iron Valiant, Urshifu, Dark, Toxtricity, and then he has Pincurchin here to boost Iron Valiant with the electric terrain. Toxtricity can also get a big damage increase in here. And then he grabs Iron Hands on top of it. Like, holy cow, this is a terrifying team. And then he goes for some pure just counterplay options here. Three unaware Pokemon in Skeleturge, Quagsire, and Clodsire. Volcanion is Volcanion's Volcanion. Sableye can cause a lot of really weird shenanigans. It has Prankster, which gives it priority moves on its non-attacking, or it gets priority on non-attacking moves. So it can be really, really chaotic and weird to use or to play against. And Ditto is just using his remaining points efficiently in order to deal with setup sweepers. Now, his captains are Toxtricity. I think Toxtricity is something that generally makes sense as to why he would want to terrestrialize. But he's going Poison, Electric, and Normal. Poison and Electric, purely offensive options here because it's just double dipping on his stab. And then Normal actually allows him to get stab on Boom Burst, which is a move he gets. So absolutely huge damage there. And then he's grabbing Ditto. His only other options for Terra Captains were Pincurchin, Sableye, and Ditto. He wasn't too keen on using anything with Pincurchin other than just terrain setting, and as far as I know, he actually had a lot of consideration between either Sableye or Ditto. Went with Ditto. He was forced to pick Normal as one of the Terra options because, again, you do have to have Stab. And then Fire and Fairy are, again, very good defensive typings. Fairy gives you even more offensive coverage. So with, for instance, Haxorus on our other team being able to terrestrialize into a Fairy and in front of a setup Haxorus and be able to take an Outrage and dish out some more damage, that can be pretty big. All right, I want to talk about Toxtricity here. Toxtricity is very interesting. He was a very prominent player last time we did a draft league, and it was particularly because of Terra Normal Boom Burst. This was right at the start of Scarlet and Violet. So Boom Burst is a sound move. It's just Hyper Beam, but slightly weaker, but you can just constantly spam it. And Toxtricity's ability, Punk Rock, boosts sound moves. So Boom Burst does a lot of damage coming off of him. 114 special attack isn't anything to laugh at either. So with all these boosts, Toxtricity does a ton of damage. Realistically, the biggest problem he has, though, is the fact his speed is 75. So he runs into a really annoying situation to try to deal with, where if he wants to actually outspeed to KO a lot of Pokemon, then he needs to run a Choice Scarf and Timid Nature. But then that opens up a lot of other Pokemon to be able to take hits and then revenge kill him, in which case he needs to have a Choice Specs and Modest Nature and just go in the complete opposite direction. I mean, you can generally go somewhere in between as well if you want to fine tweak it, but basically what I'm saying is that speed is going to really restrict him. He doesn't have a very clean answer to a lot of things, and so you generally have to commit to, do you want absurd power or really hold yourself back in order to make sure you can close out a few more extra kills? Still, with that said, I think Toxtricity does have some really funny surprises he can do. He can do like a shift gear physical set where he can just set up on them. And so I just showed off some physical moves here. Gunk Shot, Wild Charge. Those are some pretty strong stab options. And then he even gets Drain Punch. I mean, his bulk isn't that much, but it's also not bad. So, using Drain Punch to heal stuff back, I think it can be pretty good, especially if you can eliminate ground types who would absolutely obliterate Toxtricity or anything with coverage for it. Or he can just Terrasilize out of it and go normal again. I don't know. I think this will be a very interesting Pokemon. I don't know how much will be brought this time around because a lot more people in this league now have more experience with him and counterplay around him. So I'm curious. We'll see how it plays out. I do want to talk about Volcanion. Volcanion is Volcanion. I mean, for the most part, let's just look at this. Like, admire the numbers for a minute. All right, thanks for admiring the numbers. Now admire the moves for a minute. All right, great. So Volcanion is just, yeah, Volcanion is Volcanion. Water absorb, so it's completely water immune. Means that he can be, he can actually sit in on Dondozo. Sometimes that is sometimes. I mean, because usually if Dondozo wants to run coverage for Volcanion, he's gonna be limiting what kind of sets he can run. So Volcanion can sometimes sit in on it. The big thing is obviously just Volcanion can just throw around Steam Eruptions, and nobody really wants to take it unless you're water immune. You're taking a lot of damage, and I think it's a 30% burn. It's not fun. He's definitely more of a counterplay kind of pick. I don't expect to see Volcanion being, like the main threat of a team, more of just the like fixer. And even though, his biggest selling points are his offenses, but still, like, look at these defenses: 120 defense, 90 special defense. And again, if Volcanion's best moves are attacking moves, just throw an Assault Vest on him. That fixes his special defense, and he is really, really fat. He can take a lot of hits and do a lot. So, I mean, I'm curious to see how this plays out. Definitely something to keep in mind for later in the league. But again, it's like he runs into the same problem that Toxtricity has, where he manages to be slower than Toxtricity, but we have some on speed Pokemon with monstrous special attacks with huge, just, kind of like kill button options. And so where a lot of teams are probably going to be worried with like Iron Valiant and Urshifu, Toxtricity and Volcanion can be really, really good fixer options for just breaking through answers that might be giving, tougher matchups into the rest of his team. Our third team here is Noah. So last league, Noah built a team around Terra Normal Toxtricity. And unfortunately, his Toxtricity was stolen. I mean, it was stolen a little late, so Noah had a few options to try to nab it, but still, he didn't quite get Toxtricity this time. But he's got a very interesting team, and funny enough, another Pokemon that's able to utilize Terra in a very similar way. So let's go and show off what he's got. He started immediately off with Corviknight and Urshifu Rapid Strike. Corviknight's a very nice defensive option. I know for at least know his history, he very much enjoys Corviknight's one of I wouldn't call it probably one of his favorite Pokemon, but he has used it quite often in showdown matches and whatnot. It's a nice Pokemon. You get some good defensive options. Iron Defense Body Press is a really fun combo for building something that's durable and offensive. But then he grabbed Urshifu and Enamorus for just some really interesting offensive presence. This is also, I believe, more of him trying to experiment with these Pokemon. I don't think he's actually used them that much, and I'm not sure how much experience he actually even has with some of the Scarlet and Violet Pokemon. Although obviously Urshifu's not from Scarlet and Violet though. But anyways, he definitely has some really good offensive presence with those two, and then Corviknight for just Corviknight's solid glue, honestly. I mean, there's plenty of people who just will slap it on every team they have because it just rounds out so many things. And so he definitely has a pretty interesting start there. And then 3 Pokemon back to back in Scyther, Ursaring, and Magneton. These are all really fun Pokemon. I can definitely see him trying to do something with, like a common idea of saying, I want some bulky Pokemon, but not traditionally bulky Pokemon. I want to get something with a Violite. Obviously, Magneton and Ursaring can make some great work without a Violite, and maybe even Scyther. And so it's interesting. He has some cool options with that of cheap Pokemon that he can definitely get a lot out of. Scyther also gets him a defog option, which is something that I was trying to go for. He took the Scyther right before I was about to draft it. But, I mean, hey, it is what it is. Annihilate Baxcalibur gives him some good setup options. They're absolutely terrifying. Last league, he used those 2 as well. I think he's trying to give him a second chance and try to see how much work he can get out of them. And then these last 4 are really some interesting picks into here. I believe Dreadnought gets some really good moves. I'm not sure if he gets Shell Smash or not. But definitely the 2 I'm very interested in here at the end here is Bombardier and Drifblim. Of which... Hey, look at that. He's got a Terra Captain. Bombardier, he's picked Flying, Dark, and Rock. Flying and Dark are its already base stab options, and Terra Rock is something we're going to get into later, which is why I was saying he's picked a Terra Captain that has some very, very similar applications to what I was talking about with Toxtricity. Ursaring is his other Terra Captain that he's going to be bringing along. Normal, Ghost, and Fairy. Ghost is a very nice defensive option. It's going to help him out with fighting attacks. Giving a nice immunity. It does also mean that if he wants to try to do some spin blocking, he has an option that isn't Annihilate, or I guess Drifblim, but I think it's mostly just to try to stop some fighting attacks. Fairy, again, a very nice defensive option. I think he's probably going to get more use out of Fairy, even though Ghost gives him the immunities. I think Fairy's resist, along with its offensive presence, might wind up being more beneficial. Ursaring does get play rough, but who knows? Ghost does also have some offensive niches, right? I mean, you're able to hit psychic types pretty well, and other ghost types. But now, he still has enough points for another Terra Captain, this one being Magneton. And Magneton's a Pokemon that I was saying I was also personally looking for getting. Actually, I don't think I did say that. I was looking for Scyther and Magneton. He nabbed them both from me. How dare he? Magneton's really fun, though, because it can run some Violite stuff. We'll be showing its stats in a little bit. But it's also a very, very good offensive Pokemon. It's got a very respectable special attack stat and a speed that is fixable with the Choice Scarf. Electric and Steel are probably, just some good options here. Electric's pretty alright because, again, it's like, if you can get some good chip with Volt Switches, boosting it a little bit harder, you can get some fun work out of that. Terra Steel, I think is used for one thing and one thing only, and I love it. I'm really curious to see what Terra Ground's going to be coming from. It makes him at least neutral to ground type attacks, so I'm not too sure if it was more of a defensive option in that regard, or if it was him trying to get something that is a better answer for electric teams. He can switch into it already with a resist and then Terra Ground and start hitting with hard Terra Blast. I'm not too sure. But let's look at Bombardier real quick, because I do want to talk about this and why do I compare it to Toxtricity. So it is a little bit faster, but notice it's still not, it's still in a general ballpark, kind of like how Toxtricity is. It's got a decent attack stat to compare to Toxtricity's special attack, but it has, like Toxtricity, it has an ability that boosts a non-stab move of his very effectively. Where Toxtricity was boosting sound-based moves, Bombardier's Rocky Payload will boost rock-type moves by 50%. And getting moves like, Rock Slide and Stone Edge, it hits pretty hard. I mean, it's effectively like saying Bombardier already has stab on rock moves. But the thing is that if you, like, let's say you took a rock type and then you terastallized into a rock type again, you're going from 1.5x to 2 times damage. Now, the thing with Bombardier is the ability is not actually stab. It is applied multiplicatively with all other damage. Which means if Bombardier tears into a rock type, you're getting a 1.5x damage, and then another 1.5 that's multiplying onto that from Rocky Payload. You wind up doing more than double damage from that. So it's a better boost than if Bombardier was a rock type terastallizing into a rock type again. So Terra Rock Bombardier launching off a Stone Edge. This is where I'm talking about that kind of damage, just absolutely monstrous. And it's the same kind of stuff Toxtricity was getting away with this Terra Normal Boom Burst. And Bombardier is in the same situation here, where its speed really isn't enough to be able to take, free KOs all the time. And so if it wants to be able to outspeed and kill a lot of Pokemon that it wants to be able to prey on, it needs to run a Choice Scarf, which means it's probably going to be losing out on KOs against really bulky Pokemon. So this is what I say is, even though it's such a very different Pokemon, I feel like it's going to be playing very similarly, where you can either choose to run Life Orb or Choice Band to hit really hard, or a Choice Scarf to really outrun things. Technically, you can do some really interesting support options, Tailwind and U-Turner in there. So, I mean, you could do that, although I don't think its bulk is quite there to want to do something like that. And plus, it is just such a good offensive presence. I feel like you just get more value out of it attacking. Magneton, I do want to talk about Magneton. All right, Magneton, another Eviolite Pokemon, 95 defense boosted with Eviolite. This thing can be very fat. At the same time, you can just say, don't bother with Eviolite, just go full offensive. 120 special attack, hits like an absolute truck. Holy cow. Sturdy makes sure you're at least going to let off an attack. You can always hit something. And here's what I was talking about, where I think Steel or Terra Steel is not even a defensive option. Because Magneton already has stab on Steel Beam, 120 special attack, and then because you have Sturdy, you're always going to ensure you can get an attack off. Which means, you get Sturdy, a Choice Specs, max special attack, modest Magneton off of that high special attack set. You can get a Steel Beam that's probably going to be killing on a resist. Like, that will hit like a truck. And so you can use Magneton as this, great equalizer attack, where you bring him in and you say, I'm killing something right here, right now. You got to figure out what is worth losing. And so that's the really interesting thing here. And then, if you really want to outplay someone, you just, say, oh, hey, yeah, I know you're going to switch, just Volt Switch out later and play that Gambit again later. I mean, that alone is already like a terrifying option Magneton can run. Obviously, he's a very versatile Pokemon outside of that. Right, Volt Switch alone is already a very valuable trait to have, but getting, Magnet Rise to fix your weaknesses, Light Screen and Reflect for support options. If you're doing a Violite, you're bulky enough to get these things up, and then Volt Switch out to your team, and now you've got stuff that's ready to set up. So I definitely see Magneton as very versatile and useful here. I mean, I'm not even getting into Magnet Pull and Analytic, which are fantastic as well. Drifblim, I really want to see Drifblim do well. I very much like this Pokemon. It's got absolute garbage defensive stats outside of its HP. Its HP is fixing what is some horrendous defense and special defense. I mean, this thing looks like Wobbuffet when you're looking at those numbers. But I mean, its abilities are fantastic. It probably has one of the best support move pools out of this entire draft. I mean, look at this crap. We've got Haze, Tailwind, Will-O-Wisp, Strength Sap. Strength Sap, I think, at this point is probably one of the best healing moves in the game. I mean, you are absolutely crippling. Like, if anything has Strength Sap and it has usable speed, it is a defensive check. It can check defense. It can check physical attackers. That is my firm belief here. And then Drifblim can try to run some really, I think its offensive sets are a little more niche, but it can definitely try to do stuff like that because, I mean, Unburden will let it double its speed, so just any kind of gimmick to just dump your item as fast as possible, get that Unburden boost, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're just too fast.
And then if you lose your item, acrobatics does double damage. So even though your attack is only 80, you're still hitting pretty hard, and that's stab. Boost. Flare boost is like a special version of guts. So if Drift Bloom is holding a flame orb and burns itself, then you get a boost to your special attacking moves, which means, hey, look, you get Hex and Shadow Ball, right? If you get Toxic Spikes out, Hex is a much better option. Or even just Will-O-Wisp on defensive ones. Calm Mind can set up to make that even stronger. Um, I think this is a very fun and versatile Pokemon. I really hope to see this thing used. All right, let's go into our fourth team. This is mine. Hello. I went for a relatively Kanto team here. A lot of this was built around, I wanted to try to see if I could do something with Articuno, and I especially wanted to use Gyarados. Um, and from there, I was like, all right, let's see. Can I get away with doing something that's all Kanto? I mean, technically, I can't say this was a Gen 1 team because I've got Slowking and Scizor in here, but that's why I'm specifically using the phrase Kanto here. It's a fun theme, fun way to just make things a little more interesting and everything, and it was a way to try to force me to use some of these Pokemon that I otherwise would not have considered. For my captains here, like I said, I really wanted to use Articuno. I went for Ice, Ground, and Fire. Ice because I felt like that was a better offensive stab, especially since I'm using Slowking here to set up Hail, and Hail's going to boost Articuno's physical defense. If I had to Terra into one of the stabs, I'd rather still have that. And plus, with Articuno having things like Freeze Dry and Blizzard, squeaking out that little bit of extra damage just feels a little too appealing. Ground was because, well, I this team feels really, really weak to electric type attacks. I have Doug Trio as an immunity, but it's Doug Trio. I should not be relying on him as my only way to deal with electric types. And you can just look at this team and see, oh, oh, you know, a lot of my big threats are weak to it, right? A lot of my significant Pokemon are weak to electric types. I really don't have many options in terms of resists or answers. So Terra Ground is going to be an option for that. And Terra Fire, um, honestly, a lot of this came down to I couldn't find a interesting Terra type that I really wanted to bring. But Terrafire was one where I saw a few interesting calcs for this. In fact, Terrafire Articuno can live hits from Choice Band Chenpao and Oko with Terra Blast. So I thought that was kind of a fun interaction there. And plus, again, Fire's a nice defensive typing to bring. Um, I don't expect to get that much use out of Terrafire for Articuno. In fact, I don't expect to get any or much use at all out of it. I think its default typing is actually surprisingly one of its best options, but we'll get to that in a second. Gyarados, like I said as well, Articuno and Gyarados are my focus for this, so I definitely want to get some use out of him, and we're going to do that with Flying, Ground, and Dragon typing. Flying, it's his hardest. He doesn't have very good Flying Stab to begin with, so using Flying to get a Terra Blast for Flying Stab is just very, very effective. Flying is very hard to resist, and especially if you've kept notes at all about what people have been drafting, flying is fairly unresisted as a whole throughout all of this. So it's just a very, very good coverage option to have. It's what Gyarados usually runs even outside of a draft format. You're just doing Dragon Dance, Terra Flying, Terra Blast, and you can get a lot out of that. Again, ground for the same reason here. I'm just terrified of electric types, so we'll see how that plays out. And then Dragon, again with Articuno's Fire here. This third slot was something of, I kind of feel like I'm going to be hard pressed to find any situations where I don't want to use Flying or Ground. Ground is already something where it's like, I'd rather just play around it and not lock myself into being unable to get my Flying offensive damage. So realistically, it was just more of, did I have a funny build in mind? And yes, I did. So we're going to go with Dragon. It does technically give me an electric resist, which is pretty fun. So I can technically use it for defensive purposes. And with my remaining points, I chose Muck. It's the only mon I could afford left, but I also kind of like being able to bring him along. I have to choose Poison for one of his Terra types. Honestly, I don't think I'm ever going to be using Muck offensively. If I do, that'll be really funny, in which case Poison might have a purpose. Even still, I think Grass and Fairy are probably better ones.
Grass and Fairy, these are mostly defensive Terras. Grass is so that I can resist Earthquake and threaten Dondozo. I can pretty much get past all of his options. The only reason to stay poison against Dondozo is if he has Body Press, which he does, as far as I know, run it more than Earthquake. So, maybe I will just stay poison on him. Fairy's just realistically there so that maybe like Haxorus can't do too much against Muck, and I can hit with like a Terra Blast or something. I don't know. Again, it's more of just it's there, right? Technically, at that point, if I don't run Terra Fairy on Muck, I have no way of actually even having a Fairy type. So, behold, Muck is my Fairy type. Marvelous creature, right? All right, let's talk about some of these Pokemon. I was mentioning Articuno. I really like it. I mean, look at these stats here. And then again, when you're talking about the snow being up, that my defense gets a 50% increase. So in the snow, Articuno is actually a physical wall more than a special wall. And that's actually kind of, I don't know, it's funny in my book. I think it's very interesting. Um, Realistically, when I have these notable moves here, Blizzard, Freeze Dry, Hurricane Roost, these are the moves I kind of intend to use throughout the league. I mean, Freeze Dry lets me hit water types a whole lot. I mean, Articuno surprisingly has a good matchup into Dondozo. Dondozo has a pretty weak special defense, so things like Freeze Dry will do a ton of damage to it. And especially in the snow, there's nothing he can do to this thing unless Dondozo's really set up or something. So Articuno is definitely something in there where it's my go-to switch-in Pokemon when I don't have a very good answer, because even super effective hits can be shrugged off with Roost, and then I can just chip them away with, 100% accurate Blizzards, Freeze Dry hitting water types, and then, I don't know, Hurricane for like Amoonguss or something. I mean, even Amoonguss is weak to Blizzard anyways. Technically, I can do stuff like Tailwind. Tailwind support could be pretty nice, but I mean, I have other flying types as well. You might have noticed I grabbed the other two legendary birds, so I feel more inclined to run Tailwind on those two than Articuno, but it's still there. I believe Articuno also gets U-turn, so hey, I get some, momentum out of that. But realistically, the most I expect out of this thing is just Freeze Dry Roost and then Terra Blast for my interesting Terra types I might have. I really just want to give a big showcase of look how high this bulk is. I mean, Ice Flying doesn't seem like a good typing, but honestly, the more I've been looking at it and options for terastallizing and everything, because the ice type gets to benefit from the hail for being a defensive Pokemon, I actually want Articuno to be an ice type to benefit from the snow. And flying, funny enough, lets me answer a lot of the problems, lets me answer problems that I otherwise would have had. I get a ground immunity, which is nice. I get an added resist onto fighting, which means I'm now neutral to fighting moves. And if you've seen how many fighting threats there are in here, that's pretty big. Obviously, we get the downside of we're weak to rock by a massive degree. And this is where I was mentioning before that rock coverage is actually going to be really nice. Rock is something that I'm weak to as a whole throughout my team. Um, but I feel pretty nice in the regard of rock's not always that common of an attack that I'm going to be seeing on a lot of these Pokemon. I don't think people are going to be bringing rock on everything. Obviously, the presence of Articuno on my team means they might definitely consider it. But at the same time, it's like I think being able to be neutral to fighting means that this flying edition is great. I want to be an ice type for the boost. Flying is surprisingly not a bad typing to combo with it. And so it's like, funny enough, I actually kind of don't want to Terra Articuno for defensive options and mostly want to only do it because it's an offensive option. Anyways, enough of that rambling on. Just a quick look at Gyarados here. I mean, this is really just to show you why I'm considering Gyarados the foundation of my team here. I mean, Dragon Dance, Waterfall, Terra Blast, he gets fantastic coverage out of that. For the most part, anybody trying to team build around me is going to have to respect that and make sure they have answers for it. I mean, in a lot of situations, if you don't have a solid answer, just a single Dragon Dance is end of the game. I mean, obviously, you can find plenty of situations where I need to get like two or three, but probably two.
Intimidate and Moxie are very good abilities in this. Moxie's part of the reason why Dragon Dance can just start just snowballing and roll right through them. Intimidate I can even use for more defensive sets. I mean, Gyarados has some pretty respectable bulk on the special side, and then with Intimidate, his, you know, practically 80 defense is notably better now because the enemies are hitting less hard. So I can even run like a bulky set. And this is also kind of nice since Gyarados does have defensive Terra options. He's got good coverage as well. Earthquake, Crunch, Iron Head, like look at all of these. These are great. And a little sneaky Outrage at the bottom. He could get his Dragon Stab and start trying to do something with that. I don't expect that to do much, but that will be a pretty funny option to do. So yeah, no, I hope to get a lot of work out of Gyarados. And might as well just go full circle and show off all my Terra Captains here. I think Muck is purely just going to be a defensive option here, getting a lot of resists out of Poison. Poison is a good defensive option. He's not quite as great as his Alolan counterpart, but I'm planning to use him probably the exact same way for most situations here. 105 HP, 100 special defense, he is fat. 75 defense, it's okay. But I mean, look, you've got Poison Touch with Poison Jab. That is a stupidly high chance to poison people. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a 50-50. Drain Punch, funny enough, I think that's probably one of his best forms of healing. But basically the usual thing is you're going to be doing like Leftovers or Black Sludge, Protect to just buy extra turn to heal up. Poison Jabs, you can poison people. Drain Punch for coverage and a little bit more heal. You're just chip healing yourself while chip damaging the opponent. Alolan Muck has the benefit of Dark type, allows him to have a little bit more interesting type matchups. I think he's only weak to ground in that situation, but he loses his fighting resist. The fun situation with that, though, is Alolan Muck has knockoff, which this Muck does not. I will be losing out on that. But I do get some nice support options. I mean, I still have elemental punches. I even have some bulk options, so Curse and Acid Armor. Those, okay, that's, that's pretty nice. I don't know how much use I'll get out of Acid Armor, but I can try to do it for a purely defensive set. And then if I in any way want to try to do offensive Muck, I think Curse is probably going to be the route for that. Anyways, that's enough rambling on my own team. I want to talk about some more. We got Mason here. I put my little note down here. I want Mason to win. He's got a fun team. I mean, look at this thing. Hard Sun. Setting up Sun with Torkoal, and then look at all these Sun Sweepers he's got. Lilligant, Scovillain, Charizard, Slitherwing, Chi-Yu. And then, yeah, he has some other Pokemons in here to try to round things out a little bit. Definitely, though, it's really interesting to see because you got Scovillain, Charizard, and Chi-Yu. I kind of lump them up as all very similar Pokemon. You just want to get them in. You want them to hit fast. You want to hit hard and hopefully get a one-shot. And they're all very good at that. So let's talk about his captains, though, and then we can kind of go into that from there. So he's got Charizard. This is Fire, Dragon, and Grass. Fire, obviously, for that stab. Again, the whole idea with a lot of these Pokemon is he just wants to get in there, hit as hard as he can. You're getting that Sun boost from Charizard, you're getting the Fire Terra boost. If you're holding like a Choice Spec, you're hitting even harder. And then Charizard's got the ability Solar Power. That hits even harder than that. It's disgusting. Dragon's probably a pretty good defensive option in this, and also if you just really want some offensive stab. I think it's a similar thought process with Gyarados of, really don't know. There's not many useful options. What else would I really want to get out of using Charizard if it's not just in the sun, going Terra Fire, doing that nuke damage, like even resisted, that's a ton. So realistically, doing something that isn't that is going to be significantly worse. Might as well just do something fun, and Dragon it is. Grass is an interesting Terra option since now you have a better matchup against people who bring a lot of water. Or if someone decides to bring like rain, manual rain even, then you have something that can first off resist but also do a lot of damage. We'll see how that goes. Jumpluff is his other Terra Captain in here. Very cheap option, and I gotta say, don't sleep on Jumpluff. I can see this thing doing a absolute ton. Again, like I was saying, flying's very unresisted, so flying is a very, very good offensive option. Grass is good for something very defensive, but still some, decent offensive buffs in there. And then Fairy is, well, I think Jumpluff gets Dazzling Gleam,
and Fairy is honestly not that bad offensively. Not into this team because there's so much resistance, but into everybody else's, Fairy's quite significant. We got Iron Valiant in both Urshifu's already shown off. Like, woo. And then he's got one more skill villain here, kind of doing the same role as Charizard, most likely, where you're just having a fire sweeper. So you got fire, and then water fairy again. Some really nice defensive options in here. Water's going to probably serve a similar purpose to Charizard's grass, where it's a good option to if somebody tries to win that type matchup against the fire. All right, let's just show off Charizard. Charizard does what I call funny damage. This is what I was mentioning before, like 109 special attack. That's pretty all right. Overheat. That's a pretty strong move. If you're terrestrializing to a fire type, you're doing double damage on top of that. And then solar power. So solar power makes him lose, I think it's like an eighth of his health every turn whenever he's in the sun. So the sun's boosting his damage up 50%, and then solar power actually gives him another 50% boost on that. So, if we do the math here, we have a 50% boost from choice specs, 50% boost from solar power, 50% boost from sun, and a 2x boost from Terrafire. Those are all multiplicative. That is some serious damage. I should specify this is Timid Charizard. He could run Modest, and it's not even a roll then. That is fully special defense Clodsire. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is Charizard is an absolute threat, and I think interestingly enough, probably the most valuable thing that Charizard brings to this team is that everybody going against Mason's team has to bring an answer to Charizard. He has that much pressure because of this much damage that everybody will have to build something in their team around this. Otherwise, they know they will auto lose if he does this at all. And so putting that much pressure onto people's team buildings, Mason knows they have to build around it. Which means because we're restricted on our team building against him, he has a little bit of a leg up in knowing what we're going to bring. And so it's almost in a way of he can try to play around us because he knows we can't. We can't call his bluff if he decides to just not do that at all. And so it's something that could be really interesting in here. Now, obviously, this is so much damage. Running any other set on Charizard is also kind of a loss. But I can definitely see an interaction where, you bring out this Charizard, and then out comes full special defense Skeledirge, only to find that the Charizard's a choice band with Earthquake. Or is a belly drum set, and just starts rolling. Okay, it's unaware, but still. Basically, what I'm getting at here, though, is Charizard doesn't even have to be on the team to be significant, just because of how powerful and how big of a threat he is. He's useful just by being drafted, not even by being brought onto the team. That's just baffling. And then even like I was saying, I was joking about running a physical set. He has Swords Dance and Dragon Dance. He even has Belly Drum. I honestly don't see Belly Drum being useful with Charizard. He doesn't really have the bulk to pull it off, I don't think. But still, he has it. And that's something. So, I am baffled that he's only 6 points. But at the same time, who knows? We'll see. I said don't sleep on Jumpluff. I think I'm terrified of Jumpluff. Look at this little thing. It's terrifying. All right, this thing haunts my nightmares. You're probably looking at its stats just being like, what the hell's wrong with you? Why do you think Jumpluff is a threat? Let me tell you. With Chlorophyll, Jumpluff only needs I think it's 20 or 40 speed EVs, not even a boosting speed nature. And if it's in the sun, it will outrun literally every possible set anybody can bring in the draft league, except for, what is it? I think it's Jolly, Choice Scarf, Iron Valiant, getting its speed boost from being in electric terrain. That is the only way it can outrun Jumpluff. Jumpluff on its absolute highest speed can hit 1,000. It's absurd. So it can just outrun things. And okay, technically you can say, okay, what's the point of outrunning things if it hits like a wet noodle? Well, the problem is it has things like Swords Dance. It has Acrobatics. If it loses its item, hey, look at that, you're hitting like an absolute truck. Energy Ball and Leaf Storm are also fantastic moves. Those will absolutely,
they will hurt. It doesn't matter that its special attack is 55. They will still hurt. Dazzling Gleam, I mean, like I said, this thing has Dazzling Gleam. If you have Dazzling Gleam, you can OHKO Dark Urshifu. If you have any decent fairy coverage that has more than, I don't know, 40 base power or something, you can probably OHKO Urshifu. It doesn't really matter what your stats are. So a Pokemon being this fast and being able to OHKO Urshifu is kind of, that's kind of nice. That's kind of a big deal. And then let's circle back to something I mentioned before. I've argued if you have Strength Sap and decent speed, you can be a defensive wall. Now, Jumpluff doesn't have the best defenses. 75 HP, 70 defense. But you have Strength Sap, and you are fast, and Chlorophyll exists, so you're even faster. I mean, I seriously can't see this thing not being an absolute menace against all of our offensive options. Yeah, sure, it's 4 times weak to ice, it's weak to rock, like it's weak to a lot of stuff. But it has Strength Sap. I mean, 95 base SpDef. You can just run like a plus SpDef nature, put barely any EVs in, and you can still shrug off attacks. High enough defense, hey, you're good. Even special attackers have a high enough physical attack stat where running Strength Sap's probably going to full heal Jumpluff. I see this thing not being an offensive threat entirely, but something that you cannot 1v1. This guy will win every 1v1. He won't one-shot you. He won't two-shot you. Who knows? He probably won't even 3-shot your Pokemon. But he's gonna kill them. He will kill them slowly and surely because Strength Sap exists. Now, let's pretend in some situation that you're like, okay, well, hey, what if that's not there? Oh, yes, he also has like some of the best moves that you can put otherwise. Strip all of that stuff away, and he is still a fantastic utility Pokemon. Look at this stuff. He has dual screens. He has Tailwind. He has U-Turn. This is a threat. Do not sleep on Jumpluff. Jumpluff will hunt your dreams. He will kill you when you least expect it. Look at this thing. It knows no fear. It is fear. It is the instillment of fear itself. He will kill you. All right, let's talk about Slitherwing. So Slitherwing has, well, just very high attack and photosynthesis. When you're in the sun, it's going to hit really, really, really hard. Have I talked about enough Pokemon that have first impression? I mean, I know technically I lied with one of them already because I'm lazy and don't know how to proofread these things, but this thing has first impression. I get Stab on that, gets 135 attack. Photosynthesis in the sun, it's going to give him another boost. He gets a Choice Band. We still get this common theme here of just a lot of nesting effects in play, just giving this guy stupidly hard stuff. U-turn's obviously perfect for keeping momentum up. Close combat hits like a truck. You have Stab on that as well. Flare Blitz. It's not Stab, but you're using it in the sun. Who cares? Earthquake. Okay, Earthquake's just probably one of the best coverage moves in the game. Let's be honest here. All right, can we all agree on that? Yes, yes, yes. So Slitherwing is a huge offensive threat. Is what I would say if he also didn't have very good bulk. I mean, look at this thing. Again, like, very usable bulk, especially when you're looking at the special side, and then the physical, like, who cares about only having 79 defense whenever you have Lunge to drop their attack? You have Will-O-Wisp to have their physical damage. Then you've got Morning Sun to heal, Whirlwind to phase, and Bulk Up to set up and sweep. Like, yeah, no, this thing is just stupidly versatile. And, I mean, this notable moves list would just go on for miles if I had the space for it. This thing has so much coverage, so many good options. Offensive coverage is phenomenal. Like, it doesn't stop. So, Slitherwing, it good. It very good. All right, last team, I promise. All right, I've been rambling about this for way too long. This is Nolan. He's, he's not doing us a service here. Here's his picks. So first thing he told me is that he wanted to pick Golden Go because he wanted to use bulky, fat recover Golden Go. And then he also grabbed Dondozo. Since he was the last person on the draft and we're doing a snake draft, he grabbed both of those at once. Yeah. I mean, at least he's not doing, dedicated only stall, and I just dropped something. Whoops. At least he's not doing dedicated only stall. I mean, he's got Great Tusk, Ursaluna, Mousehold. Like he can do some really interesting stuff, like a trick room mode. I mean, look, he's got a lot of good trick room setters in here. So, he does have a pretty interesting team. I'm, pretty hopeful he won't just do hard stall the whole time, saying, please, Nolan, please, please don't. But, anyways, it is what it is. Hatterene is the first Terra captain, Psychic, Water, and Fire. Terra Fairy is all right. You can hit with some pretty hard Moonblast. I'm curious to see what the Psychic is. I think part of the thought process of that is since Indeedee can set up Psychic terrain, you can kind of double dip on a lot of those damage boosts and just really hit hard with that kind of a system. Since you're already a Fairy type, I don't think people want to bring any Dark type initially against it, fearing something like a Draining Kiss or even a Moonblast. Terrifier, purely defensive option. It's good. I mean, Hatterene does also have Mystical Fire, so I guess you can get some offensive benefit from that. Terra Water, though, is definitely purely defensive. More than likely a reaction to Mason's Fire team, trying to get something with that little bit of extra resist. Phalanx is his other Terra option. He doesn't have too many Terra options on this team, so it was after Hatterene, he really had to choose between Indeedee and Phalanx. And I guess he sees a lot more use out of Phalanx, or at least in this case, versatility. Fighting is the only stab option he can grab, but Ghost and Steel are other some, pretty interesting ones. I think these are purely defensive options for the most part. Steel lets him deal with Fairy types. It does give him some extra boost to offensive coverage. I think he gets Iron Head. Don't quote me on that, but I think he does. So he can get some boosted damage there, but it's definitely, a good option for Fairy types. Gives him a resist to flying. I think Ghost is really interesting. I'm not sure if he's wanting to do it for something like spin blocking. Although I might argue it's a more offensive, like it's a more aggressive Terra if you're trying to deal with Fairy types, not Fairy, Psychic types, because it lets you offensively pressure them. And, you could just be saying, oh, well, why don't you just go dark then, right? Because, yeah, then you have a full immunity, you can hit them hard. But I think it's something more of he'd rather, not do something like that. Just take Ghost. You get some immunity stuff. You can hit Psychic types hard with like a Terra Blast or something. And you're also not weak to Fairy, unlike Dark. I don't know, though. I'm curious to see where this Ghost is going. All right, but I do want to talk about some of his Pokemon. More specifically, a lot of the other teams I was showcasing more of some of the strengths in some of his weird Pokemon. I do want to talk about that, but also, first off, I want to talk about some of the limitations he's going to be finding. Or at least what a lot of his game plan might be looking like. So Dondozo is a really, really fat Pokemon. If anybody has seen anything with VGC or doubles, you know exactly who this guy is. But he's just going to be an unaware Pokemon. You can't really set up on him. He's really fat. I mean, look at his physical bulk: 150 HP, 115 defense. Yeah, you're not hitting this guy very well. At least the best thing about trying to match up against him is these notable moves is about all he's got. Pretty much all he's going to run. Liquidation, Wave Crash, those are just two offensive options. It's more than likely just going to be Liquidation, though, because Wave Crash's recoils were really high. Body Press, if you want to do something really defensive. Curse for setup, which usually Curse Dozo is kind of the default. Earthquake's coverage people generally don't even run for because Liquidation, Body Press, Curse is a much better combo, and you pretty much need to run Rest. It's his reliable source of recovery. So Earthquake is oftentimes omitted, but at least with using this as maybe some type coverage, especially again we're in a draft format, you might see Earthquake being more useful. But notice here, the biggest problem Dondozo is going to be having is even though he has, he is a very, very useful Pokemon against physical attackers, his special defense is low enough to where you can exploit it. And so more than likely what's going to be happening is Dondozo's looking for opportunities to come in when the special attackers are either very much wounded or already gone. And you can see this trend kind of continuing with Alomomola, where Alomomola's defense and special defense, I mean, look at this. It's almost a 2-to-1 ratio. So, and when you're looking at this as a whole as well, look at the rest of this team here. We also have Great Tusk and Ursaluna that are very defensive Pokemon. And so what you're going to be finding is a common idea that he's got some fat Pokemon that are very, very good matching up into physical attackers. Now, I want to talk about Alomomola not for its weaknesses, but for a single strength it has. Well, okay, two. It's got Regenerator. Regenerator is a very nice ability, being able to switch out and heal. But let's talk about something else. Alomomola's got some utility, some interesting utility. Now, I'm trying to remember what the actual. I'm trying to remember what the actual ability is. I think it's Healing Wish is the move, where you kill yourself and the Pokemon you bring in is full healed. That move's practically useless on Alomomola because, for one thing, it is pretty much effectively entirely outclassed by just flat out Wish. Look at Alomomola's HP. 165 base HP stat. Now, whenever you use Wish, it is the next turn, whatever Pokemon is in on your side, and that slot is healed for half of the HP of the user. Alomomola has 165 base HP, which means half of Alomomola's HP is like most of everybody else's. So Alomomola can set up a Wish, switch out, it heals itself from Regenerator, and then whatever Pokemon's coming in is about to be full health. And so he's got a lot of teammates here that are very, very effective, but they can be prone to being worn down slowly because they may not always have the best and most reliable recovery. Alomomola comes in, uses a Wish, and they're all back up. So Alomomola is definitely a very valuable option here for trying to use a hard stall team where, you know, some of these Pokemon have very reliable healing, but not all of them do. All right, and then we got Phalanx. I just want to talk about this because it's one of his Terra Captains, and it's something that's pretty interesting. Again, some of this is just showcase things I think might be very useful or interesting in the series, so at least look at, especially out of ones that may not be all that well known. Battle Armor means that Phalanx can't be crit. I believe he has another ability that I just completely forgot about including in there. It might be Justified. I think it might be Justified. Anyways, but he has Battle Armor, which means he can't be crit. It bodes very well for Pokemon that want to set up, especially if you're setting up bulk. And you can notice he has options like that. Iron Defense is going to give him some bulk. Bulk Up is going to be giving him some bulk. But realistically, the best setup move he has is No Retreat. This is a signature move. It boosts all of his stats. The only downside is he can't switch out. So it's kind of like the I'm going to hard commit to just doing as much as I physically can. I'm setting up on you. I am going to do a lot. And, you know, that can sometimes be a death sentence with fighting types because there's a lot of very good options for them, right? Like you've got ghost types that are completely immune. That's where that ghost terror can be very useful. You can now actually start hitting them. Fairy types are a big problem, right? So are flying types or poison types can give you some issues. But look at this guy's coverage. Ironhead. Ironhead will just obliterate fairy types. They're gone. You want to bring in a psychic type? I'm pretty sure this thing gets Mega Horn. Why? I don't. He's got a horn maybe. I don't know. That kind of looks like a horn. Rock Slide coverage for flying types. How does this guy get first impression? How does everything in here get first impression? You know, I know at this point I've joked around the idea of saying the very first Pokemon I said had first impression on here doesn't actually have it. This guy has it. This guy actually has it. And then again, it doesn't help the fact that No Retreat's already a very good setup move, but he has even other options like Swords Dance. Like what the hell? But yeah. So I think Phalanx is gonna be a really funny Pokemon. He can do some setup, do some lovely shenanigans. I'd love to see a game where he's able to get in. Maybe if you have some screens up or something, he can set up and then just start carrying the game away from there. With that though, that's kind of it for everything I want to show off. Those were my initial thoughts for all the teams, just showing off all the draft stuff. I do want to talk about matches as they play out and, really give my 2 cents on things. I don't think realistically going forward, I'm going to be giving, too much insightful things. I don't really consider myself that well versed in Pokemon, but I do like it. I do very much like it. And that's realistically the purpose here. I don't intend to take myself as any sort of authority. And if by any chance you're first off, a person who doesn't just know me personally and watch me because you're part of the league for some reason, just, I don't know. And you're still somehow watching this. First off, wow, I'm impressed. Again, why? Why are you here? I'm baffled. But also, don't treat me as any kind of authority or anything. I know I am probably saying things that are very wrong, so I'm just going to be giving a heads up. this is more of a showcase than me really saying, hey, these are what people should be doing or things. No, no, I'm just gonna be showing off some games, chatting around, basically like, oh wow, that was something pretty clever. That's something pretty neat. And hey, if there's any feedback people want to give or anything like that, go for it. I sure love to hear it, I guess. We all like playing Pokemon, but we're not all that active into competitive stuff. So this was more of a really fun way for us to try out competitive strategies in Pokemon while just playing with each other, so that we're not quite playing with randos who are just going to completely curb stomp us all. How was that for a nice rambly mess? This thing's pretty long. I've been sitting in like this chair for a while now, just talking to my microphone. That's been an absolute blast. But yeah, no. I guess. Hey guys, stay tuned for match analysis. How long do you think I can just keep rambling like this? Do you guys think I can like stretch this video to like 2 hours? Because I didn't actually time this, and I don't have an active timer right now to see how long this is. But I could imagine this being like an hour long already at this point. Yeah, how much work would it be to get to two? I think at this point it actually might be pretty hard though, because I'm already getting a little tired. I like talking a whole lot. Like, I can do that, but I mean, this much talking all at once, and I'm trying not to have a bunch of dead time or anything like that. I think that could be pretty hard. I think I might, I think I might just end the video here instead of dragging it out to 2 hours. I could though, I just want to let you guys know I could. Again, if anybody's still watching at this point, I just want to let you know I could drag this out to 2 hours. I want you all to know that. But it is by my grace that I won't be doing that, just to save you guys the time. I hope you can appreciate that. Just let build up my character here. There's I guess like my debut of like actually putting out videos of significant talking and stuff. So I want to give a good first impression here. So again, just reminder. This is for you guys. This is for you, not for me. Not because I just want to throw stuff out there and talk into a microphone forever because I'm a sweaty nerd who likes to look at numbers all the time. No, it's not because of that. It's because I want you guys to understand I'm a good person because I have the opportunity to go to 2 hours, but I won't. I think that's okay. It just occurred to me that I've done all this talking and I don't even know if this is actually recording. I'm just going to hit the stop recording button like the macro I have and then go into my recordings folder and just pray that there's a file in there that's like 50 minutes long or something, or however long this is. Yeah, that'll be funny.